John Quincy Adams, a national Republican, was the sixth president of the United States, serving his term from 1825 to 1829. He was chosen to become president by the House of Representatives after the election of 1824. Andrew Jackson initially won the popular vote but had 32 votes fewer than he needed to win in the Electoral College, and characterized Adams' election as a corrupt bargain. Although Adams was a great diplomat and Secretary of State, having part in negotiating the Treaty of Ghent and the purchase of Florida, speaking out against slavery and writing the Monroe Doctrine, his presidency term was quite uneventful due to him constantly facing hostility from Jackson supporters. His goals were to improve national trade relations, strengthen the exchange of goods between the North and the South, and to advance the education of the people. To do this, he proposed to Congress a program that suggested the construction of roads, canals, educational institutions, and more, but got ignored because he lacked support from the people and the Congress. He later on signed the Tariff of Abominations, which angered a lot of people and ended his hope for re-election. The Erie Canal was completed on October 26, 1825. The opening of the Erie Canal contributed to making New York City a chief Atlantic port. In 1825, the first experimental locomotive was built and operated by John Stevens. In 1827, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad became the first railroad in the U.S. to offer transportation for people and commercial goods and officially began operating on July 4, 1828. The typewriter, called the typographer at the time, was invented and patented by William Austin Burt on July 23, 1829.
In 1828, Andrew Jackson became the 7th President of the United States. On his first day of his presidency, he threw a party for a drunken mob. Now, Andrew Jackson, he was already a national hero for defeating the British people at the Battle of Orleans and the Creek people at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. During his first year of presidency, he filed something called the Indian Removal Act, which resulted in many Native Americans having to move out of their hometowns and into a reservation somewhere west of Mississippi. Despite doing all these things, Andrew still won by a landslide in the election of 1832. Andrew Jackson released yet another tariff called the Tariff of 1832. A tariff is basically taxation that taxes on special things such as wool or iron. Now, this taxation was actually supposed to lessen the taxes on the first taxation called the Tariff of Abominations, but places such as North Carolina were still mad because they invested in things like slaves instead of cotton, meaning that they had to pay more tax than the northern cities who make their own clothes. And they even threatened to nullify or invalidate the thing, which made Andrew Jackson very, very mad. Andrew Jackson went on to release the Nullification Proclamation, meaning that a state no longer has the right to nullify or invalidate a tariff. After issuing the Nullification Proclamation, Andrew went on to issue the Force Bill, or the bill that allowed the military and the Navy to assist him while he was taxing people. Now, this made many people, like the Whigs, think that Andrew Jackson was a tyrant.
お前はもう死んでいる。
So, along with the Navy and the Army, Andrew Jackson went on to tax many people. This force bill gave Andrew Jackson a lot more power when it comes to tax, and anyone that says no will perish or be punished in some sort of way. A man by the name of Nicholas Biddle wanted to pass another bill to extend the second bank's life for yet another 20 years. So, like any other man, he went to the Congress to ask for their approval. Upon arriving to the Congress, he faced a problem. Andrew Jackson was there. Andrew Jackson did not approve of his bill because he was scared that the second bank will oppose him in his election. Andrew Jackson vetoed. In fact, Andrew Jackson was one of the first few presidents to use his presidential power at a higher level. After banishing the second bank, Andrew Jackson made something called pet banks or state banks that also had the same power as the used-to-be second banks. So pet banks could print money and all other things, which caused a lot of problems later on.
A few years after pet banks were established, Andrew Jackson was able to free the U.S. from their national debt, the first and only president to do so. Smaller banks continued to print more paper money. In between 1833 and 1877, banknotes that were in circulation rose from $10 million to $149 million. Initially, it helped finance a lot of things, but it eventually caused inflation. This led to an economic crash called the Panic of 1837, which lasted until 1843. A lot of Democrats became Whigs, and the remaining Democrats further supported slavery.
In December 1835, the Battle of Alamo took place in Texas. It was the battle fought between the Republic of Texas and Mexico. The Mexican soldiers from Santa Anna sieged the fort for 13 days. As a result, the Mexicans won this battle against Texas, killing the Texan soldiers in the fort. Few months after the Battle of Alamo, Samuel Houston with Texan soldiers made a surprise attack against the Mexican soldiers. Remember the Alamo, remember the Goliath. In result, 800 of Texan soldiers defeated 15,000 of Mexican soldiers. By this battle, Santa Anna signed a treaty recognizing Texas's independence from Mexico. In 1836 July, Andrew Jackson started the Specie Act or Circular. The Specie Act is an executive order that requires payment for government land to be in gold and silver. This act was caused by Congress because they forced the president to strengthen the government's currency. It affected working class people badly because they couldn't purchase the land due to the lack of gold and silver that led to Panic of 1837. In 1837, March 4, Martin Van Buren was elected as president with strong support of Andrew Jackson. In the year of 1837, the Panic of 1837 started. The Panic of 1837 is a financial crisis in the United States that triggered multi-year economic depression. As mentioned before, it was caused by rapid economic expansion, mainly by the Specie Act. This economic hardship caused profit, prices, and wages to go down and unemployment to go up. Also, the Specie Act was stopped. Later in 1848, it was restored by the California Gold Rush. In 1840, Martin Van Buren was defeated by William Henry Harrison in the presidential election. William Henry Harrison, an American military officer and politician who was also the 9th president of the U.S. He was the oldest president to be elected at the time and served the shortest tenure in U.S. history. He won a Whig Party presidential campaign in the year 1840 with his vice president John Tyler. This portrayed to society that Harrison was a simple man who sprung from the people, but in reality he was rich and was also part of the Whig Party. The Whig Party were people who believed in a strong federal government and a group of people who came together to oppose President Andrew Jackson and the Democrats. Many Whigs called for government support and business through tariffs, national banking, and federal aid for internal improvements. During that time, Harrison was 68 years, which was the oldest president to be elected during that time. So, a month after working, or about 32 days, he died in office, and he was also the shortest president to serve. When Harrison died, the next person to become president was John Tyler. His vice president. John became the 10th president and served during the time of 1841 to 1845. He was the first vice president to succeed to the presidency after the death of his predecessor. He was a stalwart supporter and advocate of state of rights, and he adopted nationalistic policies as president only when they did not infringe on powers of the states. But even though he was part of the Whig Party as well, he disagreed on several issues. This meant that he thought state governments should have more power and that the federal government should have less. On September 1841, Tyler vetoes a second bill for the establishment of National Bank of the United States, which made his entire cabinet resign, except for the Secretary of State Daniel Webster. On March 1842, the Massachusetts Supreme Court establishes the legality of labor unions, including the right for workers to strike in the case of Commonwealth and versus Hunt. And on August 1842, there was the signing of the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, which normalizes U.S.-British relations and also settling boundary issues around the western Lake Superior and reserving numerous smaller borders. On June 1844, President John Tyler married Julia Gardiner in a private ceremony at the New York City Episcopal Church. His first wife died earlier in 1842, which caused him to meet Julia later in 1843.
Video is going to be about President James K. Polk. James K. Polk became friends with Andrew Jackson later on. They both stood on the same side for the Bank War and earned his reputation of being a prodigy of Andrew. He later became a governor of Tennessee in the year 1835. Polk was originally the leading contender for vice president in 1844. with the former President Martin Van Buren running for the presidency in the Democratic Party. For Polk to become president, he has to gain more votes than the former President Martin Van Buren. After such ballots, he must also defeat the infamous Harry Clay of the Whig Party to become president. Martin Van Buren failed to annex Texas, which caused the Democrats to rethink about presenting him as the nominee. The people also showed disappointment in such decisions. The reason for this is because the Congress had already passed a vote to annex Texas in 1845, a proposal by John Tyler. Polk presented goals to annex Oregon and Texas, pleased Andrew Jackson, who also persuaded the other Democrats into voting Polk as the president nominee. Manifest Destiny is a term used to describe the expansion of America to spread democracy and other good works. These goals helped Polk to be the nominee for the Democrats instead of Martin. Polk was called the dark horse candidate because he defeated the former president and has unforeseen potential. So following, Polk defeated Henry Clay and became president. The annexation of Texas occurred in 1845. Although the Republic of Texas was formed in 1836 and they are willing to be a part of the United States, a rough tension occurred between the U.S. and Mexico. This due to the fact that Texas was originally a part of Mexico prior to 1836, and the close borders of two countries intensified the tensions. Polk dispatched General Zachary Taylor to prepare to defend Texas after annexation to prevent Mexican forces from entering. Polk also sent John Slidell, a minister, to Mexico in an attempt to purchase the land to prevent a war. John Slidell attempted to negotiate with the Mexicans, but the Mexicans think that the United States is attempting to start a war. The Mexican-American War started in 1846. After a series of battles, the United States forced the Mexicans to sign the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, which relieved the Mexican of 55% of the land before the war and further expanded United States territory. One of the results of Texas annexation was the spread of slavery. Another action that Polk took was the annexation of Oregon, which belonged to Great Britain. Fortunately, both Polk and the Great Britain did not want to start a war. Polk first claimed the land of Oregon as a part of the United States, but the British refused, and after Polk firmly stated again and again his stance, Great Britain compromised. Many people wanted the United States border up until 54 latitude and 40 longitude, but Polk made a deal with UK that only extended the border up until 49 latitude. Polk has also lowered tariffs significantly, which are trade taxes, and this enabled more international trades. And he also established an independent national bank. Many of Polk's decisions were controversial, and many people are biased based on what view they took in understanding history, but many historians describe him as an effective president. No president in between the year 1825 and 1850 was Zachary Taylor. After the annexed and unorganized territory by James Polk, Zachary Taylor faced an issue where the North and the South disagree with each other in slavery. The Southern people tried to convince Zachary Taylor to enable slavery in the newly annexed regions, mainly California. Finally, Zachary Taylor decided to let the states themselves handle the slavery laws, knowing full well that the states are not inclined to their own agenda. The Southerners were furious about Zachary's decision. During his term, Zachary also ignored many side issues, such as the slave market in Columbia District and the request for strict slave fugitive laws to be enacted for the South. The Southern people were furious and decided to threaten to secede from the Union North, and this agitated Zachary, who as a war hero threatened to attack the South. Zachary Taylor became president in 1889 and died from illness in 1850.
Hello guys, welcome back. Right now we're ranking our presidents. So on this tier we have S, A, B, C, D, F. S being the best and F being the worst. Okay, let's get started. So the first president is John Quincy Adams. Now, his only bad trait was that he was stubborn and independent and failed to develop support in Washington. including his own party. But the good side of John Quincy Adams was that he actually supported scientific and economic development, such as a national universities, and he also spoke against slavery. Where shall we rank John Quincy Adams?
Yeah, I believe this is a pretty good spot because although he kind of failed to develop support in Washington and also his own party, but the president is not always about parties. They are, uh, I believe they are also determined by how much they have done in the course of time and for the states. And when we take a look about the pros that he did, the good things that he did, I believe that he should deserve A tier.
That's true. Okay, moving on to Andrew Jackson. Personally, I think he should go on like D tier or anything. But let's see what he did. First of all, he forced Native Americans out of their home, and he had duels in his backyard, which killed many people. He threw a party in the White House, which made the White House stink for a few weeks. And he killed a Native American boy's parents. But then his good thing is that he freed America of national debt. He adopted a native boy, and he gave presidents more power. Where should we put him? D it is. Next on, moving on to Martin Van Buren. Joanna, do you want to tell us about him?
So for Martin Van Buren, he won the White House and formed two-party system. Also, he earned accolades of scholar for his contribution to the development of American political system. But he's bad because he faced the global economic disaster known as the Panic of 1837.
He seems okay.
Okay. Next up, it's William Henry Harrison. We can just put him in F tier because he went into office and died. How about that? John Tyler. What did John Tyler do?
He proceeded to veto major Whig legislation.
Yeah, wow. Where do you think we should put John Tyler?
B.
B? Yeah, I think B would work too because he didn't do like anything that's like super bad.
Because I also have something to present when I talk about President James K. Polk that makes John Tyler an even higher spot, which B seems fitting for him since he actually gave several proposals to the Congress to annex Texas, which also would be a good thing for Texas and for America. But it is kind of controversial, and I'll explain later on.
Okay, next on, James K. Polk.
This is the part where the president ranking gets a little bit tricky because James K. Polk he actually did a lot of things during his term, and it ended up to be something good, but also something bad at the same time. So it's very controversial. So some of the bad things is he went to war against Mexico, and this is a bad thing for the Mexicans, especially after they are only freed from from being a Spanish colony in just less than 3 decades. But then, and it is also a good thing because it also expanded the U.S. territory. And another bad thing that James did is he caused the United States to spend more than $75 million on war, which is a huge amount of money on the war, which also makes it a very bad thing. And he also did not stabilize conquered states during his term, which eventually affected Zachary Taylor and other presidents after him. And this could be one of the the primary reason for civil war, because the annexed regions they brought in even more attention allowed in there. And he also legalized slavery in annexed Texas, which is a very bad thing, to be honest, because slavery it kind of puts a ledge between the Union North and the Confederacy later on. And some good thing he also did is to create an independent U.S. Treasury, annex Oregon without war, Oregon region. He also reduced tariffs, which are trade barriers, and so it enabled more trading internationally. And he also took California, which later allowed a gold rush to occur in the U.S. This is after the annexation of California, and he expanded the U.S. territory by 38%. And all of these actions are controversial. Why? Almost all of them are. Why? Because each action helps promote the cause, but at the same time, on the other end, it brings in a negative thing.
I think C is okay.
Okay, so
Yeah, I do think so because it layer pavement, like it's like a pavement. It paves the way for civil war, and which would be considered actually a bad thing in the United States.
okay. Next on, we have Zach Taylor.
Yes, so Zachary Taylor, he actually died in like 1 year after he became the president. He is powerless to completely solve the North and South slavery issue after the annexation made by James K. Polk, and he is somewhat weak especially compared to Abraham Lincoln. He also ignored many side issues, which are also slavery. Southerners and congressmen feel that Zachary robbed their power when making decisions. The good thing about him is he's temporarily subdued the Confederacy, or maybe we should call it the South from secession, which is separation of the North and South, which is a good thing. And the second good thing that he said is he also let states government to decide for themselves whether or not they want slavery. But then this also kind of result in a backfire when the Southerners and the congressmen are furious of him from robbing their power and not doing things in their own way.
So, Sammy, where would you rank him?
I believe that he perhaps should be in D tier.
Okay, how about you, Joanna? I think I agree with these. Okay, me too.